Tony from Buildium here, the platform that activates property managers to own their everyday operations, make residents feel at home, and take on more doors. Today we're here again with Tony LeBlanc from Ground Floor Property Management all the way from New Brunswick, and we're talking about how to get into multifamily. Episode 3, we're going to talk about where the rubber meets the road and execution and really delivering on your multifamily promise. So how you doing today, Tony? How are things going?
I'm doing very well. How you doing, man?
Good. So excited to talk with you. You know, we've had I'd say a great couple first episodes. First we talked about just, to give people a recap. Episode 1 was all about really getting into multifamily and everything you have to be aware of from like a macro perspective, and what that means for your business, if you're ready for it, and where you need to be in order to be ready for it. Episode 2 was all about marketing and really going after the new kind of owner and investor clients that you'll find in the multifamily side of your business and how to best do that. And now we're going to talk about execution. So, of course, you've got everything set up. You've got your processes ready to go. But you really just have the foundation. Execution is probably one of the hardest parts, I would imagine.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what that means and one of the first things that multifamily property managers have to deal with is leasing up a new property. So could you talk to me a little bit about that, Tony, and what that's like for you?
So if everything goes right, so there's 2 types of buildings that somebody can onboard. So one is an existing complex. So somebody's bought something typically, or they're changing property management companies. They're coming to you to take after the building. So in an ideal world, you're taking over a building that's either full or close to being full. But either way, you have to make sure that you're ready for the influx of turnovers that's going to happen, because the reality is the bigger the building, the more risk and opportunity you have on a monthly basis to have turnovers. It's just a part of that world, right? So you got to make sure that you're staffed up to be able to handle the showing requests. So whether or not you have an on-site resident manager that's doing all of the showings themselves, or if you have leasing staff, or if it's the owner, you personally doing the showings. So you kind of got to make sure that you have the people in place, and then start thinking about what are the different segments of time you're going to be doing your showings. Mm-hmm. I find that as property managers, we can sometimes put ourselves in the corner to where we desperately want to be there at all times of the day and all times of the night to be able to deal with a prospect coming in interested in renting a property. But the reality is that can burn you out really fast. So one of the things that we've learned over the years is basically we try to set somewhat schedules in terms of when we're showing. So we try to set up, we try to bulk a bunch of time in the morning that we'll do showings, and then we'll do another kind of stage at night where we do showings, and we try to do the same thing with weekends.
That's a great tip, by the way, for property managers out there who don't do that. I would say that's one of our pro tips is bucket your time, because getting into that rhythm, as Tony's saying, makes so much sense, and I would imagine it's easier for your staff to manage as well.
No, absolutely. We've seen ourselves run our leasing agents crazy in terms of trying to be all over the city all at once, like back to back showings. So what we do now is we try to accumulate showings. Let's say we have one unit that we want to show. Well, try to do your best to put them all together in an hour or a 2-hour span, kind of like an open house is really what you're trying to do. Depending on the amenities of the building, a showing can take you anywhere from 10 to 15, 20 minutes tops. Sometimes it might get a little lengthy, but we do them in 30-minute gaps because sometimes there's driving that's required. So, but if you're in the same building, 30 minutes usually gives you enough time to properly give the right service to the prospect coming in. What are the action items that they need to do if they're interested in the property, and then get you prepared for the next one, and gives you a few minutes to check your emails, check your voicemails, and all that type of stuff. So yeah, really being aware of your time and who's going to be responsible for all that stuff is super critical. You got to have down.
Yeah. So we've talked about showings a little bit. Let's take it from, all the way from lead to lease in this process and get a little bit more into the nitty gritty. So, looking at the first thing that you have to do, obviously, whether it's a lease up or whether it's a completely, you're already managing an existing building and it's just churn that's happening, you want to list the units, right? So you want to have that initial process of listing. You want to have a great listing, first of all, that speaks to the amenities. So how do you do that? How do you do that and make sure that it's really efficient in that, number one step of marketing to residents?
Yeah, that is a very important part. So one of the first aspects, it all starts with good pictures. So go out, convince your owner that you need professional photography done for your units. A lot of property managers make the mistake of treating their apartments unlike they would treat a listing on a home, when the reality is, in my opinion, they should be at the same level, the same caliber. So for an apartment, it's like $100, a couple $100 to get professional pictures taken of the suite, common areas, and the exterior. So if you're, if you have a really good camera and you have the confidence to be able to do that, then go ahead. But my recommendation is get a pro to go out and do that. So great photography. You start putting your ad together, like you said, mentioning and outlining all the different amenities and kind of the target market that you're putting out there. So we have that already. Basically, what we do is we load all that up in Buildium in our listings manager. And then from there, we have syndication tools that will pull that data from Buildium and then publish it across different websites that we use to do our advertising. Here in Eastern Canada, Kijiji is 99.99% of where we get all of our tenants. So it's a pretty simple one. It just pulls it, populates it in there. And then tenants usually email back on the ads, or they have the option to call us. And we've also got some ads to where we actually directly put a Calendly link in the ad to give the tenant the power to be able to book the appointment right on the spot with us. Yeah, so that saves a lot of time. One of the things that you want to, technology is your friend here, but I also understand the importance of getting on the phone with somebody, because us as leasing people and property managers, it's our first initial stab at some pre-screening, right? It's like, okay, I can kind of get a feel of this person. What's your name? Where are you living? What part of town you in? What are you looking for? So that's like the phase one of screening. If you're getting some red flags in that conversation, then you can either try to get out of not showing it, or at least you're going to the showing on your terms, and you're being a little bit more strict on when you can go show it, and you try to schedule it with something else. And it's just kind of a good way to proceed from there.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because there are pre-screening tools that you can use to ask those questions as part of an application, and with using technology. But it just depends, right? Because sometimes people can say one thing and then you kind of dig in a little bit more and you find something out that's a bit different. So I think that's huge. Also, one of the things that I wanted to bring up with, creating listings that really sell the property to the right kind of residents that will benefit most from it. I think one of the important things to remember is how you structure that listing. Because the listing essentially is content. And being in marketing, we create a lot of content here at Buildium to deliver value to property managers like yourself, and just across the U.S. and into Canada and all across the globe. So lots of people look at our content. One of the things that you always have to do is you have to understand your audience, right? So what are they going to benefit most by potentially moving into your property? What's really going to ring true to them? Because you could have all of this information in a listing, and you could have like one of the most important things buried in a whole list at the bottom. And if you're doing that, you're doing yourself a disservice, because someone might miss that and they might go to a competing building.
A perfect example: if you're marketing, let's say, a C-class type building, putting in your ad that you're close to a bus route and close to grocery stores is like key. It's like, that is like one of the most important things that we highlight in a lot of those types of ads, right? Because a lot of them won't have vehicles, and they need to be in walking distance, and they need to know that there's good amenities very close by in proximity to where they live. So huge selling points.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of property managers know this intuitively, and they do it all the time. Shameless plug here, though, for the 2020 State of the Property Management Industry Report.
Yes.
Property managers, if you haven't read it, it's actually a report that Buildium publishes in partnership with NARPM. We do it every year, and this particularly has a lot of insights about what your property owners are looking for and what your residents are looking for. So a great resource for you to take a look at, especially if you're trying to figure out like what are the amenities that residents most want today. So shameless self-promotion there. Okay, so now that we've talked about listings and really how to write an amazing listing and put the right type of information in there, let's go and talk about screening, because obviously this is a huge piece of the multifamily puzzle. So how do you approach your screening, Tony, when it comes to the properties you manage?
So for us, it all starts on that initial call that we get with regards to booking an appointment. And the next opportunity that we get, obviously, is when we meet these people face to face. So that's why I can understand the lure of doing kind of showings to where they just have a key box and they go in. But in the multifamily world, it's 99% of the time you're there, you have a live leasing agent bringing somebody through. So it's all about kind of face to face, meeting them, getting to hear them speak, getting them to kind of get some information, insight in terms of where they live, the quality of life in terms of where they're working. It just kind of gives you your first basic instance of what these people are going to be like. Some of the questions that I've always trained my agents to ask is kind of like, why are you looking to move? The day of the month is also important. It is for us, at least. It's relevant in terms of when we're doing the showings. Our eviction dates are usually like the 15th to the 20th. So if I'm showing an apartment on the 19th and they say, oh, I got to move right away, it's a red flag. It's like in the back of my mind, I got something tingling. It's like, oh, are they getting evicted from somewhere else and they need quick access somewhere? So you can get a ton of information with regards to that first showing. So you show the place. If they're interested, then you send them through your application process. And then go through the screening of the app. So again, you're checking your verification from employment. You're checking to see, can they afford the place? Social media is your best friend when it comes to screening, in my opinion. What we find out about people through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all over the place. Google has literally probably saved us thousands and thousands of dollars in bad tenants. So we do a lot of that stuff. We ask for pay stubs in terms of verification of employment. That's important to us. And past references, past landlords. So that's important too, right? You want to kind of get a feel of how they were as tenants previously. So, and
right.
then,
and of course, all of that in accordance with the local regulations and, following fair housing, et cetera.
Absolutely. Yep. And then at the end of the day, it's really you're making a judgment call at the end of the day, right? You're looking at all of the details that you have on this person, and are they going to be a right fit for this property? Can they afford it? Is it can they just afford it, or they have plenty of room, disposable income in terms of this is not going to be a stretch for them? And those are some of the key factors. From that point, we either approve them or we deny them.
Yeah, and that's exactly why Buildium, for example, works with TransUnion to have that kind of screening solution in place that just makes it easier for property managers to take away some of that legwork, which is so great to hear. All right, so we talked about screenings. When it comes time to then say you got a tenant that's going to be, or a resident who's going to be perfect for the unit, as far as like actually getting them to sign the paperwork and doing that whole rigmarole, like how do you run that?
Well, we have two different ways of doing that, and I know the trend is everything is e-docs. So you prepare the lease online and you send it for electronic signature, and it's beautiful. It's very quick and it's very convenient. We do some of those. However, I would say our mainstay in terms of how we do leases is it's an in-person meeting. So once we've screened and we've approved the application, we call them or email them, say, listen, your application has been approved. I need you to book a time for you to come in to sign the lease. And for us, again, it's another opportunity to really spell out the importance of some of the rules and regulations of where they're going to be moving to. There's a lot of documents that we need to go through apart from just the lease contract. We have a Schedule A, which 26 other kind of like rules that they have to follow. Tenant insurance details that we need. We need to get vehicle information from them. And again, it's another way for us to really invite them and make sure that we're in sync, that they know what we expect of them and we know what to expect from them. I think that face-to-face is really, really critical. And again, to me, tenants are just like owners. I want to somewhat build a relationship with the people. I want them to be able to come to us if they have any needs or if they have any issues. We're providing a roof over their head.
Right. It's their home.
And yeah, exactly. So I like taking that extra 20 minutes, a half hour for my staff to sit with them and go through that. I know from a time management perspective, it's not, incredibly efficient. However, I still think it's important to have that face-to-face communication in this business.
Yeah.
I may be old school on that. I don't know.
Well, no, that's a good point, is like there are certain things that you want to say. There are certain things that you want to tell someone face-to-face.
Absolutely.
And it's because you know that there are certain pieces of information that will make the overall process so much smoother. And there are certain pieces of information that you'll deliver in a much better way in person.
Yeah.
So yeah, not losing that connection is what, and that's what we like to say at Buildium here. We put people first in everything that we do. Like the technology is to support people, is to support property managers in working with people and those relationships versus being like a barrier or replacing it. So
yes, that's critical. And there's one thing to initial a document that says this is what your late fees will be, but it's a whole different aspect when you can look somebody in the eye and explain to them, say, listen, if your rent is late, you're going to be charged this, and then I'm going to be chasing after you. And if I don't get payment after this, I'm going to start the eviction process.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're really doing is you're onboarding residents in the most effective way, and you figured out how to deliver that information. So you're preparing them for move-in. So that's awesome because you're being transparent and you're setting the expectations from the get-go. Now, once you get to move in and the inspections process, how does that go for you?
So for us, it's probably one of the most complicated parts of the monthly cycle of renting apartments. So on any month, when you start getting into the multifamily space, I find it's a little bit more hectic in terms of ins and outs. So you have a lot of apartments that are becoming available. So it's where one tenant is living there and then another person is coming right in after. So first thing that you got to do is you have to be in complete alignment with your maintenance team to be able to know what apartments are coming up that month. We start that whole pre-phase by doing about 2 weeks before the first of the month. We start calling the tenants that are moving out and start doing pre-inspections to be able to get a gauge of the conditions of the apartments. Because if I'm going into an apartment that they've been there 10 years, I could be in for a world of hurt when they're moving out and I got somebody moving in that same day. So in terms of painting, maintenance, all sorts of stuff. So you got to start by that. You got to know where you are in terms of having those apartments to be rent ready on basically that day. So if you can get the other tenants out early, great. Try to work something out with them, give them a few bucks, do whatever you got to do because it's going to be worth it. If you see that there's going to be a lot of work, then you got a little bit of time to be able to work with the people moving in to see if they can come in a few days late. And again, you can compensate them for that or whatever you need to do. Again, it's just going to buy you time to be able to do the maintenance. And you can explain to that and can be completely transparent. Say, listen, it's not something I can control. But I want to give you an apartment that is perfect. So they're probably going to need to work with you. Yeah, exactly. So once you've got that figured out, it's all about lining up all your move-ins and scheduling the appointments. So you're going to be, again, whether if you're utilizing your resident manager to do your move-ins or if you have a designated staff member that helps you do that. So again, for us, it's an on-site person-to-person meeting to where we meet them there with the keys. We do a walkthrough with our inspection app. We go through the unit. We write down if we find any issues, if they have any concerns, we'll write it down on the moving condition report, and then we sign off on it. And then basically we hand them the keys and make sure that they know how to get a hold of us in case of any issues that come about. So that the important part here is to make sure that everything is properly documented. That inspection report is gold, because if they move out 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, and you do that move out, and you know what, they're often going to say, oh, well, that was like that when I moved in. And, oh, no, it was already like that. And I was like, I never had that documented. And again, the importance of getting them to sign off on it. Technology is helping tremendously. For the better part of my career, it was paper-based. We had this sheet of paper, we filled it out, and we kind of did our thing and took our pictures and uploaded it to a Dropbox and kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, that must have been very painful.
Oh, incredibly. And it's just inefficient. You lose stuff. Now, you got these beautiful inspection applications. You sign in and you go through the unit, check, take a picture, digitally sign it, and hit send. It sends them an email, sends you an email, and everybody's golden. So very, very valuable.
Yeah, and you're talking about apps like HappyCo, and those kind of apps. And I mean, you're right. It just makes it so much easier. I can't imagine what it would be like to file all those photos or upload every single one. So yeah, amazing.
It can be painful. And then there's a lot of little things, like if you're in a bigger building, amenities. Well, you gotta kind of, sometimes you gotta handhold people through the process of, here's the gym, here are the hours, if there's lock codes, how to get into your mailbox, how to get into, details for the underground parking, storage, snow removal, all sorts of little details that sometimes, again, that move in is where you would do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. And this is where you can also benefit from a resident center or a resident portal, right? Clearly, you can communicate that important information in person, but you also can have all of that document center ready to go, accessible 24/7, so that when there are those questions that you might get that could flood your phone lines, or it could flood your email box. Maybe that someone just looks and goes to their portal because they're paying their rent there, and they get the answer.
Yeah, we've been making a huge push over the last couple of years to really try to get away from phone calls, because the bigger you grow, and from a management company, the phone calls can just be, they can put you at a standstill to getting any work done. Like the phones just can ring nonstop. So it's constant communication and trying to train your new tenants. And you got to do this almost every opportunity, to where it's like email or resident portal, like everything has to come in from a digital highway coming into us, so that we can track the stuff, and so we don't lose track, and things that never needed to be a phone call anyway. So
yeah, and I think it's important to remind people that we're not saying, hey, don't interact with your residents. That's not the case at all.
No,
just saying bucket the kind of requests and bucket your time. If there is time that you want to have to make a human connection, make that like a regular thing when someone is there to talk to a resident, so they know that they can go and make the connection. But yeah, if you don't want the tail to wag the dog. In this case, you want to make sure you've got your processes and your communication flows locked down.
Yeah. Sometimes we want to be too nice. We want to be too available, to where it's like, here's our number. Just give us a call anytime, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Make sure we'll help you. And I love that. It's great. But from experience, it's really put us in a hard place at certain situations. So now the conversation is still, we want to be there for everything, but it's just a different entry point to how to get a hold of us. We're going to be we're going to answer it as quickly. It's just that this allows us a little bit more time and space to be able to handle things and prioritize things better for everybody involved.
Yeah, makes tons of sense. And that's a good transition to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Like, obviously we mentioned, in episode 1 that managing maintenance is a huge thing for multifamily, and specifically the new common areas and the amenities that you're going to have to manage, which is very much so a multifamily thing. So I wanted to dig into that a little bit with you and talk about like what it is that you use to manage your amenities and how you do it in a way that really makes the process just tight and streamlined. Yeah.
So for us, it's really, there's not a whole lot of technology involved in terms of managing those aspects. So we've got buildings to where we have in-house resident managers that actually live there. So what we require for them are schedules to be able to know, okay, so let's say if I get a 4-story building, I know that every morning they check the entrance doors, they wipe them down, because that's got the most traffic, right? So you want to make sure that those are always the focal points when any visitor or prospect is coming into the building. That's like your first impression. Is the front entrance clean? Is the garbage emptied out? Are the windows nice and clean? Are the mailboxes in order and stuff like that? And if there's carpets, then are they vacuumed and the floors are washed? So those are hit every morning. And then basically we just have an understanding of knowing when the rest of the common areas are clean and what type of schedule that they're on. So maybe they do 1 floor a day in terms of the vacuuming or washing of the floors and stuff like that. That's kind of the very basics of that.
Sounds like there's a maintenance rhythm that you have to figure out that's unique to each property that you're managing.
Yes, yeah, 100%. Because some buildings, the common areas can be huge and very, very time consuming, or it can be simply just a small little corridor if you're managing like a little 6-unit building or a 12-unit building. It really depends. So common area maintenance is one thing, and then you have more of the preventative maintenance. So we try to do kind of a building walkthrough once a week to go through the major mechanical or the major components of the building. So again, stuff like your doors. So all of your exit doors, are they latching properly? Are they locking properly? Are the mechanisms good? Is everything safe? If you have a camera system, you want to make sure that that's all working properly. Access to your garbage bins. That's a huge thing in the multifamily world, dealing with garbage and how all of that works. You want to make sure that that's all cleaned up and running good. Your mechanical room, elevators and stuff like that, and just walking through the building, checking your fire alarms, your exit lights to make sure that they're all working. It's basic stuff, but it's essentially just a kind of a slew of a bunch of checklists that you got to go through and physically walk the building. I'm trained every time I go on a site. I'll usually sit in my car before I walk in, and I just sit outside and I kind of look around. I'm looking at the siding, I'm looking at the windows, I'm looking at the roof, I'm looking at the front entrance. I'm kind of noticing all these little things. And that's what a good resident manager does. They notice the details, and that's what makes the difference in a great run building versus something that's, people let a lot of little things slide, and that adds up over time.
Yeah. Any other, like, I would say, amenity tips that you would bring up? Your choice, whether it's something about managing pools or fitness centers or gyms, landscaping or event calendars that property managers would want to know.
I know. And in terms of gyms, you definitely want to have hours so that they're not there all the time. So you probably want to have a lock code on the door so that they can't get in, say, past 10. Because oftentimes a gym is either sometimes above or below a unit or beside unit. So the last thing you want is people running on a treadmill at 2 a.m.
Unless your soundproofing is really good.
Yeah, exactly. Pools and hot tubs are they're not a whole lot of fun to deal with if you have them. They're a lot of work. Hot tubs can be a real challenge because you got to usually check the pH levels of those things twice a day. So you really got to have the staff to be able to look after that stuff. So
think hard before managing a hot tub.
Yeah. And also make sure that your liability insurance from your company perspective is checked. Because the last thing you want is to be put at risk for something that you had no idea that you had any exposure to. So double check yourself on all that stuff. So we're getting into a new age now to where you're starting to see a lot of cool prop tech stuff. So you're seeing like these building platforms to where essentially somebody can become like a mini ISP to where they can provide internet services, Bluetooth, Alexa, all this fancy stuff. I wish I had buildings that we had that. We've looked at it, but those are definitely some cool up and coming things that I think you're going to start seeing more of, and more specifically, smart equipment. A perfect example is being able to detect that your hot water tank is leaking, like immediately, having these little sensors around water spots that can send a signal to somebody that something's happening. we're slowly starting to see kind of a lot of that stuff come in.
Yeah, especially on the building management side of things. That's a huge opportunity there.
Yep. Intercoms are another challenge sometimes. You got to make sure that you're always on top of that. They should be part of your checklist in terms of move-ins and move-outs. You always got to update your intercoms with phone numbers and stuff like that. So that's a new aspect again of the whole multifamily world.
Well, that's great. So I'm sure we can go on and on about this stuff because there's so much good stuff. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But one of the things that I did want to talk about before we close this out, because it's so important, because obviously there's a whole number of people living in a multifamily, obviously, but with that comes more responsibility, comes more liability, more concerns about safety. Yes. And just curious if you could quickly run through some of the main things that property managers need to be thinking about for those concerns. Yeah.
So number one, liability insurance. Review that like on a yearly basis with your insurance people to make sure that you're covered. Exposure can come in some weird ways when you come into these, bigger buildings, bigger complexes, bigger communities. So just always make sure that you're completely transparent about what type of services you're providing to your owners. Because I'll give you the perfect example. If you're managing a big building and it's one of your staffers that are shoveling the walkways and putting salt, that could completely expose you to a slew of new policies that you need to have and coverage.
Oh, wow. Just for snow removal.
Yeah.
That's a good reason to sub out snow removal, huh?
Yes. Like we had, we own a landscaping in a snow removal company in terms of pollution insurance, because you're using different chemicals and salts and all these things, and liability and workers' comp. Like, it's a totally different game. So you really got to make sure that again, this goes back to being crystal clear with the owner of what services you're providing to the building, and just being aware that you're covered for that.
As far as renter's insurance, I'm curious, do you make that mandatory in any of your buildings?
We do, across the board. We were the first ones in Atlantic Canada to partner with an insurance company to provide a tenant insurance package through ground floor. We've been doing that for about a year and a half. It's gone okay. We've been struggling with the payments and how all that works. So I think where it's going is we're gonna end up leaving that up to the tenants to get. But yes, we do require it.
Yeah, and there's an easy solution through Buildium as well, where you can set up renters insurance in the onboarding process. We actually go through MSI with that. So just as a plug there. But I think that's pretty much, well, we covered a lot in all these episodes. So I hope that everybody watching has gotten a better understanding of what multifamily might mean for them if they decide to amp up their efforts to get more multifamily owners, to manage them and really grow their business that way. So it's been so awesome talking to you, Tony. And for those of you watching, again, this is Tony LeBlanc from Ground Floor Property Management. He's got an awesome book out called The Doorpreneur. Definitely check that out. But it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Absolutely. It's been a lot of fun, Tony. I really appreciate it.